So welcome everyone. My name is Sadie St. Lawrence and I'm the Executive Director of Women in Data. I am super excited today to sit down and talk to Giorgia Lupi. She is an information designer and she's also a partner at Pentagram in New York. You may be familiar with her from her work as she's a co-author of the book Dear Data and is also the co-author of a new book called Observe, Collect, Draw, a Visual Journal. So we're super excited here at Women in Data to have a conversation because some of us in the organization are actually working through the book Observe, Collect, Draw right now as a visual journal. So it's great to be able and sit down and talk to you today. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Sadie. And I'm really excited about these, even if just virtually, to meet all of you and to have this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So for those of people out there who aren't familiar with information design, what is it and how did you get started in this industry?
Sure. So I define information design as a visual way to actually shape the different ways that client, readers, visitors have access to information, all kind of information. So it's kind of like a design process to create experiences and visuals that can help people access information. So that's the broader definition of information design. And then specifically, I do work with data, which are the most, I would say, quantitative part of what we call information, things that are quantifiable and qualifiable. So categories in a way. And then with that also becomes really a clear material to do data visualization. And so to represent this more quantitative information visually so that people can actually potentially access a lot of knowledge through this data layer. So that's kind of like the broader way. I am not trained originally as an information designer, also because there's not so many, or at least there were not when I was studying, really many courses and classes around that. I have a master in architecture, which I always say that then in retrospect for me back then, almost 20 years ago, when I needed to decide what to do for college, was my way to merge my need to just rules and scientific aspects to also the need to express myself visually. So again, I think it was a way to fulfill these two sides of myself that right now find their thrive in data visualization.
That's amazing. I'm always curious to if you notice these aspects of yourself, you talk about like the technical side and the artistic side. Were those things that you noticed in yourself as a child? Like, did you have some, inkling to always organize things, or
yes.
are there things that people could say, oh, I relate to that, and I did that a lot as a kid too?
Yes, for sure. And I mean, of course, it's easy in retrospect to say, oh, I've always been a data collector. But, I think that I can say it. And lately, I always like to share this anecdote that when I was a child, I used to spend a lot of time on my grandmother's tailor shop. So she was a seamstress, and she had, of course, all kind of buttons, ribbons, threads, fabric, textiles. And I really remember that every day for me, the pleasure was just to wake up in the morning and go to her, tiny little space. And I had this table for myself. And every day I would reorganize her materials according to a different rule. So one day will be precise and so all of the sizes from the tiniest to the biggest. Another day will be color coded. Another day will be, say, taking buttons and dividing them up if they had one hole, two holes. So all kind of different rules that I found so fascinating. And I think that I liked the obsessive aspect of organizing things through categories, but also really the visual pleasure of then seeing them all laying down, right? So I think, again, it was still kind of that balance. And then, as most kids, I used to draw all the time. I drew everywhere. So that was also a pleasure that I had. But yeah, and then, growing up, I've always liked math a lot. And I've always liked art. So I guess it's just easy. I kind of quite didn't like the other subjects that I studied, but math and art has always been, they've always been really interesting to me.
So since you sit in kind of these two worlds, right, of math and art, Like, do you consider yourself more of an artist, a technologist? Like, do you feel like you lean into one more than the other? And how do you balance the two, considering a lot of the time our world wants to fit us, I feel like, into boxes, right? Really predefined boxes. So how do you
Yeah, I mean,
look at yourself?
yeah, I think it's interesting because I absolutely look at myself as a designer, which is not a technologist and not an artist, but I think it's an interesting half point between again having some sort of like freedom to express myself creatively, but on the other hand maintaining some rigor and I'd say again scientificity that is kind of like much more driven by the technological world in a sense, even though I myself am not a technologist at all. So I use a lot of very analog tools to make sense of the information that I have. And then of course with my team, you know, I work with developers and coders. So, you know, that is part of how then we develop products. But like the way that I make sense of information is like very analog. So yeah, I do define myself as a designer. I think that I thrive with rules and with clients briefs and you know with like giving rules and milestones for myself even when I engage in self-initiated projects. So I'm not, you know, the kind of artist that has an idea and without any kind of like structure or data will just go and create. And I think that in my work you also see that I always like not always like I always do include a legend for people to interpret what I've done. So it's never like, oh, I felt like drawing this data that way and then it's all up for the feeling that the piece gets you and gives you. It's about why if you really want you can decode every single piece of data that went into the piece because I'm giving you the keys to read it. So that for me it's much more like a way to think as a designer rather than an artist.
So I know in your book, Dear Data, you wrote on postcards, right? And so these were hand drawn. Is what tools do you use today? Do you start with a pen and paper? Where does that process come? I know you work with engineers and developers, but how does it start for you?
Oh, it's always pen and paper. I mean, as we speak, I have like, you know, of course, paper and like a nice pencil case that got gifted to me by one of my teammates, like full of pencils and markers. And I think I really literally always in my purse, in my bag, carry pens and papers because that's my way of making sense of an idea. Is also my kind of like Linux cover. I feel that if I don't have like some letter size paper with me and some pens, I risk of, I don't know what can happen, but you know, the world might fall apart. So that's really the way that I function in general. I think that I understand that I've had an idea when I put it on paper in a way, which you know it can be even limiting because I'm not one of these people that can kind of like create as they walk. I need to have a table.
Mhm.
But yeah, so there are many different ways that we can go about starting this conversation about how you know a creative process come about. To me, again, because there's always data involved, it's either that I am starting to collect data or that I'm like looking at data that a client gives me, and so I sort of like have the data in my mind, and then I have the goal of the output, whether it is an interactive experience, whether it is, you know, a piece of art, or whether again it's a postcard that I needed to draw, and then all of these together merge with the topic that I'm representing. It gives me an idea of how to visually approach the problem. I then spend usually a lot of time looking for visual inspirations in things, you know, whether pieces of art or scientific drawings that can help me have an inspiration for how to translate numbers into images. But this is very much abstract, and then, you know, project by project, of course, of the limitation of the tools, the materials, and understanding really the parameters of success for the audience are the ones that drive the choice.
Yeah, I love that last portion you said, really, like there are limitations based on, you know, the tools or the audience and what you made, the medium you're working with, right?
Yeah.
Um, how, what role do you think limitations play in our creative process?
I do personally love limitations in the sense that I think, well, think about it. Everybody, besides the most confident artist, everyone is a little bit afraid of the blank page. Like, I'll give you a blank page, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I think that everybody self-doubt themselves, and everyone would love to have at least a hint, what should I think about. So like, think starting from this very little and easy example, you can get into how having rules can really trigger positively the way that you think creatively. It can again give you a less fear of the blank page, and so you start really to making and if you think about like data visualization is ultimately a if something then something else kind of process. If I find something that I decipher myself in the data, then I'll paint it yellow. If the category is another one, that'll do it blue. If this time frame is longer than 1 hour, I'll draw a line this long. So everything is about setting up rules for yourself, sort of like creating a legend for yourself before you even start visualizing. So to me, rules are really beautiful for creativity. I mean, I'm not sure that everybody would agree, but I think in my process it's really important.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to hear. I think sometimes in a creative process, we don't always want to think right away rules associated with it. So it's good to see that they play a vital role in that. Talking about
I would really
rules.
add I will just add one thing, that think about it in a much more interesting way of kind of like almost cheating, because it's you creating the rules for yourself. So you can use that type of structural and structured thought process for helping you become more creative. So ultimately, you can create the rules for yourself.
I love that. That provides a lot of freedom, creating my own
Yeah,
rules.
exactly.
So what role do you believe data plays in our lives? I'll just
Okay, how much do we have? No, so think about 2020. We passed from being only a few of us who really deeply cared about data to a whole entire world that wakes up in the morning and refreshes our preferred source of news, and like really to look for data about the pandemic, to look for data about where we're standing. Are we doing better? Are we flattening the curve? Even terms like flattening the curve have become this year something that is like a colloquial way that you can use with a stranger. I mean, everybody knows what flattening the curve means right now. And then 2020 was also for us in the United States very particular, because there was also the elections, and so data from the polls, data from the expectations. So this year in and on itself and by itself has been I think a year in which pretty much everybody realized that data is part of our life more and more, and whether we want it or not, it's a way that we have to record reality and then to represent it and to use it to make decisions. Because the data about COVID, it's the way that we decided to record what was happening, the number of people who got the test, the number of hospitalization, and number of positive cases, the ratio of infection. I mean, these are kind of like, in a sense, human-made ways to record reality. And I think there's an opportunity for the global population. I mean, I know that everybody who's listening here is already interested in data, but even for the general public to get more data literate after this year. And hopefully, we're going to see, I'm kind of like a data optimist for that. I think that, from next year or from now on, we'll see more and more people that are realizing what data is, are realizing what kind of critical question to ask themselves when they're looking at a chart. And so, I mean, I don't know that I really answered your question, but I think this is what it's important to, I think, remember right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I've often referred in conversations with others to this year as the year of data literacy, which, whether you liked it or not, we all upskilled a little on data literacy in our language. So yeah, in your work, you warn a lot against focusing on just the numbers and technology and algorithms. And if you work in the data space, that's at the forefront of everything we talk about, right? Which is, the machine learning, right?
I know.
And you really suggest to focus more on the people and the stories and ideas. Why is this so important to you?
I think to me it's an approach more than a focus, in the sense that I mean, I'm of course, technology and all of the technological, let's say, tools and advantages that we can use to make sense of data. I mean, welcome, amazing. You know, of course, there's a lot that machine learning, artificial intelligence, everything that is about, like, you know, calculation computing, that can really enhance and improve what we can do with data. But I think that with any technology that we apply, we need to remember what is that we're looking for. Yes, we're looking at, I'm sorry. Yes, we're looking at numbers, but what are these numbers? These numbers are representations of our lives, of human lives, because even if we're talking about credit card transactions where there's a human behind the credit card transaction, you know, even if we talk about any kind of like medical data where there's a human behind it, and the more we remember these at any level, and the more we're able to add context, I think the more we're able to reconnect the numbers to what they stand for, which ultimately is what people understand. Because people, like, you know, we don't really are really good at relating at aggregated percentages and big data. We kind of like we don't see ourselves in that like pool of data, but we do see ourselves in individual stories and granular data points. And so I think the more we always remember the data is primarily human made. And again, I used to say that even if it comes from a sensor or a technological device, well, a human being designed the sensor and the device and decided what to collect and what to leave out. So, you know, the more we know that this is the base, I think the more we can make a good use of data, whether we use technology or not.
Yes, I would agree. And, you know, I love your data humanism of the visual manifesto guide. So if you haven't seen it, I would definitely Google it. We can also link it as well,
Thank
because
you.
it just provides such a such a real snapshot into, I feel like, what's important, and provide some context to that. What's one of your goals, or maybe you don't have a goal, but what is an outcome you would hope that by providing, you know, the manifesto, one of the things you would see people doing from having that perspective?
I think for me, it was about questioning the fundamental beliefs that we all were taught of and we all kind of like agreed upon in the world of data. So what I also, well, I loved, I mean, the manifesto, I put it out in like 2017. So it has been almost 4 years, 2016, 2017. And I have seen many positive reactions of people that started just to question what they've always thought about data. And then, I mean, the manifesto is not about providing any real solution or road to explore. It's about, hey, wait, but since data is human made, how about we also consider these? And how about, you know, sometimes we replace optimization with flexibility, or we replace, you know, data driven design with design driven data, big data with small data, because ultimately as human beings we make sense of small data to then get to big data. So that is really just the goal, to provide some other ways of thinking. And then what I like in general, you know, of so let's say that I'm really satisfied when a project that I put out, a manifesto, a thought, if it can live a life of its own after. I think that's the goal. So for example, with your data, with Observe, Collect, Draw, with the manifesto, the thing that I'm most proud of and happy about is that people are really actually then finding their own way to use these things as tools to really create whatever they want to create. I'm not precious about, you know, oh, data credit things or what, I don't know, like, oh, that is, you know, about the output. I think it's about putting out a thought. And because I'm a designer, and especially also with Stephanie, we're both designer, my co-author and collaborators in Dear Data and Observe, Collect, Draw, the way that we have to put out thoughts is visual and it's through outputs. And then, you know, that's the way I think in which I hope that things will live, again, lives of their own.
Yeah, I think one of the things that came from me from reading the manifesto was, one, just first to like focus on small data. And I think that, you know, I think of you as a child and, you know, organizing the patterns and buttons and whatnot. I think a lot of us wouldn't, you know, we probably do those things in our daily life. I
Yes.
know the home edit became a sensation on, you know, Netflix with organizing your house and everyone being in quarantine, you know, doing this organization of different things.
Yeah.
Um, but it makes it more accessible to people, right? When you realize that, hey, it's, you know, it's not always working with these large data sets that, you know, makes you a data person. the small data has so much truth to it as well. And I think
It is,
just it
yeah.
opens up a door of accessibility, which I really love.
You know, it is really true, but I think that to me it's so straightforward. I mean, to me, data is kind of like, again, language, a way that we have to abstract reality and then to represent it. So it's like, it's similar to saying that, you know, a tiny little beautiful easy poem is a accessible way to then think about, oh, maybe I want to go and read a full article of the New Yorker, which is much more dense and thorough. So, you know, I think it's similar. It's not that there's much more quality to small data than to big data. It's, I think, again, you said it it's a way that we have to understand what data is and maybe started to, you know, apply to our lives to then, if we want, be able to get into bigger data sets. But it's not that we necessarily need to. But I really see data as a language, like Italian is, like English is, like, you know.
Yeah, and I love the word that you use, accessible, there, because, you know, as women in data, our mission is to increase diversity in these data careers. And
Yeah.
one of the problems with that is most people don't want, it's not accessible to them. But do you think if we switched our focus a little bit more from, you know, the traditional technology numbers algorithms, right, to more of a, you know, it's flexible, it can be small, it can be messy, right? That
Yeah.
we would see more women get into this industry.
I mean, I would ask you, and I'm before responding, before answering, I'll ask you a question. Why do you think that data right now is not very accessible to women? Because I mean, you have worked with women and in this organization where more. So what do you think? What do you think there are the perceived roadblocks on the fears or the things that makes it less accessible?
Yeah, so one of the things I see is a misunderstanding of the role, right? When you're looking to get into a new industry, um, you only see what maybe popular media puts out about it. And a lot of times I see a lot of women actually very qualified to fit
Mm,
the role, but they're not counting themselves ready because they have an ideal about it that isn't
I
quite
see.
true.
Yeah. So I think that in general, with all of the environment that will benefit from more inclusion and diversity, it's about starting to set the roles and to set the example and to create precedents. And so I think that in the past 10 years, a lot has been done, for example, in tech conferences and in conferences in general, to have a lineup of speakers, for example, again, who are much more diverse. I remember in the beginning of my work life that I have been invited to conferences specifically because they were looking for women speaker, which of course it can be not very flattering when you're asked, because you're like, come on, don't tell me, even just tell me that you like my work, you know. But I think it was the right step to do, because then the more that you get into making young women like see that they can be there, because you know many of us are actually professional in the data world without necessarily being coders or data scientists or data analysts. I mean, the more then people will be courageous and encouraged to pursue that path. And so one thing I think is really about the industry and how we set the example. And then I guess, you know, again, the more we are able to make people, and in this case women, relate with data, so have something that connects them and their lives with data, which can be showing the data is human, is also messy, and you know is not necessarily always perfect, because that's really true, data is not always perfect. That can be another entry point. So I would agree with you.
So, in terms of getting into the career, obviously, I love too how you broke down. There's way more than just data science, data engineering, right? There's all these other roles to be in the data space. If someone's interested in becoming an information designer, what advice do you have for them to start, or even start their
Yeah.
journey in the field?
Well, I guess, you know, there's plenty of things to say. So one is, as I mentioned before, there's so many different things that you can do being an information designer. And even when you do work with data, you can design for newspaper and magazines. And so for the editorial world, or you can design for physical installation in the space. And so much more for how people interact with spaces. You can be a person who designs and develops mobile apps that actually have data to display. You can even design, products. So there's so much that you can do. And so I guess the first question is asking yourself, how would you like to spend your days, like in between all of these? And so being much more of like, again, a designer that then works with experts in the different fields. And so every day, like I do, I work with different clients and different team collaborators in different mediums, because I really enjoy digging into different environments every project. But I know that there are people that really say, oh my God, no, what I really, really want to do is designing installations in the physical space, because that's really what drives me. I love how people interact. And so again, this is already in and on itself a path that can lead you to different choices. I think then there are, right now at colleges and universities, there are many, many courses within the design world, but also within, again, even just the most traditional computer science that focus on data and data visualization. So there's a lot that you can learn by going to school or by taking online classes, really, to be honest. But then I always like to say that I think, to me, being an information designer, it's about a state of mind and a mindset. It's about, starting to observe things in your life that can become data. And that is not to say that everybody needs to be as obsessed as I am, probably, with like seeing data everywhere. But it's about recognizing where the data are, what the data set could be, data set about, everything that you're interested in. It's about, I think, seeing data as a lens and a filter that you can have to see your world through. And then it's about finding models and inspirations, artists or designers or, people that work with data that you admire, and talking to them and, learning from them, and having, hopefully someone who's a mentor to you, which could even be, not necessarily a teacher, but, a person that you can talk to once or twice a year to know that you have a path, that you can share with someone you look up to.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Talking about mentors or even teachers, people who inspire you, have there been some pivotal people in your life you would say that even whether you met with them or not, you inspired you in your work?
Yeah, for sure. My PhD supervisor, who's now is a friend and a collaborator, his name is Paolo Zuccarelli. I met him at Milan, at Milan Politecnico, because after graduating in architecture, then, I was working for a couple of years, and then I decided to enroll on a PhD program in communication design. I think that he has been definitely a very important point in my life. He already was working on data visualization more than 10 years ago, and, in Italy, that was, kind of like a unique place to be. And so being there with the people who were there at Density Design Lab was incredible. And then I'd say that the partners that I co-founded my previous company, Accurat, with, Gabriel, Simone, and Paolo, and the people at Accurat have been also, I think, people that have inspired me to create my own way to go about data visualization, because together we created, a company from scratch, and we decided exactly what we wanted to do, and we made it happen. And, so that, that was great. And Stephanie Pozovic, meeting her and experimenting with her and seeing her way to approach the data world was another pivotal moment. Well, then, of course, right now I'm at Pentagram, and, my partners, Paula Scher, Michael Beirut, Eddie Opara, they have been huge designers from that I have admired from the past, that right now, I say before COVID, would be in the office here with me. And I think that for right now, seeing them and seeing how they develop their career is a lot of inspiration for me. So I guess I'd say that, I find mentorship and inspiration in many people that I meet. I've been also really lucky, I think, for the people that I met in life.
Yeah, definitely. So kind of wrapping up here, I think one of the areas that people may not recognize that you do or are is really an entrepreneur, right? With starting a company, and I feel like, writing a book too is very entrepreneurial. Do you have any advice for, well, first question, what made you decide to start a company? And then second,
Yeah.
any advice for those who are considering it themselves as well?
Yeah. Starting a company came from one of my partners that, my partner Simona that I used to work with. He and I worked together before starting a company at another interaction design firm. that we really enjoyed working at, but like more and more we wanted to do our own things. We wanted to just like go and pitch projects and find clients, because ultimately that is what gives you the freedom to be the one who decides, you know, what to take in and what to not take in. And so we were already experimenting with our own little studio within the big company that we worked for. And at some point it felt so natural to try. And then, you know, at the same time, Gabriel, another partner, was exiting from another company, and it felt natural to try and do it together. I would say that what inspired me is finding people that can become my partners. And so I would say the advice that I would personally give is find someone who you feel that you can share your passion and goals with, and who you feel that it's really just like the right person to start a company with. I probably would not have done it. I mean, definitely would not have done it by myself. And even right now at Pentagram, the partnership is a little different, because every partner, we're 10 in New York, we all manage our own clients and budgets and our own team, but we are partners anyway. And so we share, you know, this like umbrella and platform that is Pentagram. And again, I think to me it's about finding partners.
I love that. Yes, I've gone on a few entrepreneurial ventures myself, and that's been the one deciding factor if it works or not. So
Yeah, well,
that's this has been a fantastic conversation. Are there any
it has
question
been.
you feel that, you know, I should have asked and didn't ask that you think would be useful, or you want people to know?
I think it was really, really a great conversation. I hope that it could have been, you know, it will be when it'll be out inspiring for you know, for your audience. And I guess I don't know. No, there's really nothing. I'm thinking about this 2020, this very particular year. I have embarked in a few self-initiated projects. And I think that one thing that I would want to touch upon is that as designers, we feel, and especially in COVID in the beginning, where everybody had a lot of time to be home and to create, I think that there was this sort of sensation that we needed to create something. This is the year for my personal project. This is the year of like, you know, I need a show and to do and to make. And I felt pressure too. But then I think that the ideas and the projects and the thing that I wanted to do only came to me when I started to relax and be very patient with myself and be like, you know what, this is a very particular year. I just like, first of all, need to figure out how to be alive and healthy mentally. And then it is fine, even if I don't create and put out anything. So once I let go of the pressure, you know, when then the ideas came. So I guess this is an extreme way to say that I feel many of us feel so under pressure of like, you know, doing another book, doing a project, doing a thing, because everybody's putting stuff on their portfolio. Yes, we should, but also I feel that like letting go of the pressure and just like starting to play around, starting to do something small is what leads you to then put out something, as opposed to being like, you know, now I need to put out something because I need to. If you have to say something, yes. If you don't, just don't.
I think that is beautiful. I can relate very much to that. During lockdown, I felt a lot of pressure to do something as well. And
Yeah.
I ended up being like, it's okay to watch Netflix. Like,
Yeah, just cook, take care of your
yeah.
plants, watch Netflix, and you know, if an idea needs to come, it will. Or
And
just
when that moment,
play. Yeah,
yeah, and when
period.
that moment happened, then, you know, my boyfriend and I, we started to go on hiking, and he would fish. And so I brought little watercolors because I needed
Mm,
something to do. And that ended up turning into me creating an art studio and doing all this art
which
and
is
things
amazing,
that
by
I've
the way.
never done before. But
That's great.
it started from exactly what you said, which is you have to let go of that like expectation and just
Yeah.
play, and the rest will come, which is such a great reminder, especially in this year of 2020.
Yeah, I think this is a great way to conclude this conversation. Yeah,
I'm ready to
yeah,
go do some more plays. So thank you so much, Georgia. I really
yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Sadie, and thanks everybody. And you know, I always say that is if anybody has any, you know, question that they want to ask, if you feel free to reach out. I'll try to do my best to get back to everybody.
Thank you so much.